In this video, we're going to have more practice working with variables on both sides of the equation. In the beginning here, we're going to have a few equations just to practice what we were doing last time before we jump into some equations where we also throw in fractions and decimals. So looking at our first example, 6x minus 8 equals 3x minus 14. First thing I'm going to have to do is get the variables on one side of the equation. It doesn't matter if we move the negative 3x or if we move the 6x, we should end up with the same answer. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move the 3x over to this side by subtracting 3x on each side. That's going to make the equation say that 3x minus 8 equals negative 14. And then if I add 8 to each side, that's going to allow me to isolate 3x. So 3x is going to equal negative 6. And now to get the value of x, just divide each side by 3. When we do that, x is going to have a value of negative 2. Let's make sure that x is negative 2 by doing our check. Rewrite the equation in the first part of your check. 6x minus 8 equals 3x minus 14. Now we'll replace x with its value of negative 2. 6 times negative 2 minus 8 equals 3 times negative 2 minus 14. Multiply next. 6 by negative 2 is negative 12. So negative 12 minus 8 equals 3 times negative 2, which is negative 6 minus 14. And now when we evaluate each side of the equation, negative 12 minus 8 is negative 20. Negative 6 minus 14 is negative 20. The check works out, so we know that x is negative 2. Looking at example 2, negative 2x minus 6 equals negative 4x plus 8. I'm going to start by adding the 4x to each side. Add 4x on both sides. When we do that, negative 2x plus 4x is 2x minus 6 equals 8 on the right-hand side. Let's add 6 to each side so that we can isolate the variable term. That means that 2x equals 14. And dividing each side by 2, we're going to get an answer of x equals 7. Again, we'll make sure by doing our check. Negative 2x minus 6 equals negative 4x plus 8. Replace x with 7, since that's what we think the answer is. And now use order of operations. All right, we're going to multiply before we subtract or add. Negative 2 times 7 is negative 14. And negative 4 times 7 is negative 28. And now if we evaluate each side, negative 14 minus 6 is negative 20. Negative 28 plus 8 is also negative 20, so the check works out. And we know that x is 7. Looking at example number 3, 8k plus 5 plus 2k equals 23 plus k. Before I start getting the variables on one side, notice that we do have variable terms on one side that we can combine. 8k plus 2k is 10k plus 5 equals 23 plus k, which is the same as 1k. I'm going to subtract that 1k from each side, making the equation say, well, 10k minus 1k is 9k plus 5 equals 23. If we subtract 5 from each side, 9k is 18. So if I divide each side by 9, that means that k equals 2. Again, we'll check to make sure. 8k plus 5 plus 2k equals 23 plus k. K is 2, so 8 times 2 plus 5 plus 2 times 2 equals 23 plus 2. On the left, we'll multiply before we add. 8 by 2 is 16, plus 5, plus 2 times 2 is 4. And on the right, 23 plus 2 is 25. Back to the left, 16 plus 5 is 21. And if you add 21 with 4, you do get 25. So the check worked out. And again, k has a value of 2. In the next few examples, we're going to have variables on both sides, but we're going to start to incorporate some fractions and decimals as well. Your process isn't going to be any different. Okay, you're going to simplify each side of the equation, and then you're going to try to get the variables on one side, constants on the other, so that you can figure out the value of your variable. In number 4, it says that 4r plus 9/4 r plus 14 equals 5r minus 3/4 r plus 1 minus 3. The first thing I need to do on each side is simplify. All right, so I'm going to combine any similar terms. Looking at the left side, I see 4r plus 9/4 r. I'm going to add those together. All right, 4r, well, that's the same as 16/4 r, since 16 divided by 4 is 4. So I'm going to add 16/4 r with 9/4 r, which is going to be 25/4 r. Plus the constant 14 has nothing to combine with over here, equals, on the right-hand side, 5r minus 3/4 r. I can combine those because they're similar terms. 5r is the same as 20/4 r, since 20 divided by 4 is 5. So 20/4 r minus 3/4 r is going to be 17/4 r. And then the constants 1 minus 3 is -2, so I'm going to write -2. And now I've simplified each side of the equation. Now I can start to move some things around. All right, I'm going to get the variables on one side. I'm going to subtract 17/4 r on each side. Okay, if you subtract 17/4 r on each side, 25/4 r minus 17/4 r is 8/4 r, plus the constant 14 equals, on the right-hand side, well, 17/4 r minus 17/4 r, that's 0, so you're just left with -2. Now I will isolate the variable term by subtracting 14 from each side. When we do that, on the left, 14 minus 14 is 0, leaving us with 8/4 r, but 8/4 is the same as 2, so this is really just 2r equals -2 minus 14 is -16. And now to get the value of r, the only thing that I need to do is divide each side by 2. 2r divided by 2 is the 1r that we need. -16 divided by 2 is -8. So we think that r is -8. We'll make sure by doing our check. Let's rewrite the problem first. 4r plus 9/4 r plus 14 equals 5r minus 3/4 r plus 1 minus 3. R is -8, so let's go ahead and plug that in. 4 times -8 plus 9/4 times -8, which I'll just put over 1, plus 14 equals 5 times -8 minus 3/4 times -8 over 1 plus 1 minus 3. Let's go ahead and do the multiplications now. 4 times -8 is -32. 9/4 times -8, well, 4 goes into itself once, and -8 would become -2. 9 times -2 is -18. Plus 14 equals 5 times -8 is -40. -3/4 times -8 over 1. Negative times negative is positive. And then again, 4 is going to go into 8 twice. That's going to be -3 times -2, which is +6, plus 1 minus 3. On the left, -32 minus 18 is -50 plus 14 equals, on the right, -40 plus 6 is -34 plus 1 minus 3. -50 plus 14 is going to be -36. -34 plus 1 is -33. And then -33 minus 3 is -36. So -36 equals -36. The check worked out. R has a value of -8. Let's check out another example that has variables on both sides with a fraction. All right, in this example, the first thing that we're going to have to do on each side is use the distributive property. On the left, this negative is really like the number -1. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to distribute the -1. -1 times 4 is -4. -1 times -x, which again is -1x, is going to be +1x. Equals, on the right-hand side, 3/4 times x is 3/4 x. And 3/4 times -6, well, that's going to be a negative number. And if you do 3/4 times 6 over 1, well, 4 and 6 can be divided by 2, so that's going to be a 2 and a 3. 3 times 3 is 9, 2 times 2 is 1, so that's going to be the fraction 9/2. All right, so now that I've simplified each side of the equation, now I'm going to start to move things. So I'm going to subtract 3/4 x from each side to get all the variables on one side. Okay, and when we do that, -4, and then 1x minus 3/4 x, well, that's just going to be plus 1/4 x, equals, on the right-hand side, 3/4 x minus itself is 0, so we're left with -9/2 on the right-hand side. Now on the left, we'll isolate this variable term by adding 4 to each side. Now, when you add 4, okay, well, 4 is the same as 8 halves. 8 halves. All right, so what we're doing here, all right, on the left-hand side, -4 plus 4 is 0, so we're left with 1/4 x. And on the right-hand side, -9/2 plus 8 halves is -1/2. Now to isolate the variable x, it's being multiplied by 1/4, so we're going to multiply by the reciprocal of 4/1 on each side. And when we do that, that simplifies to x on the left-hand side, and it equals -1/2 times +4. Well, -1/2 of 4 is going to be -2, so x equals -2. We'll make sure with the check, rewrite the equation. Negative in parentheses 4 minus x equals 3/4 times in parentheses -2 minus 6. Replace x with -2. So we're going to have negative, and then in parentheses 4 minus -2 equals 3/4 times in parentheses -2 minus 6. I made that x right there. A -2 already. That should have stayed as an x for right now, x minus 6, which then x becomes -2. And now when we go ahead and look at the left-hand side, we're going to have negative 4 minus -2 is the same as 4 plus +2, and 4 plus 2 is 6. So this is just -6 equals 3/4 times -2 minus 6 is -8. And so we have -6 on the left. When we simplify here on the right, 4 goes into itself once, -8 becomes -2. 3 times -2 is -6, so the check works out, and x is -2. Let's look at an example where we have variables on both sides with decimals, all right? We have 2/10 multiplying 3y minus 5 equals 15/100 multiplying 2y plus 3 minus 85/100. Again, we have to simplify each side of the equation before we can start to move things around. So on each side, we're going to start by using the distributive property. On the left, 2/10 times 3y is 6/10 y, and 2/10 times -5 is -1, so -1, equals, on the right, 15/100 times 2y is 3/10 y, and 15/100 times 3 is 45/100, and then minus 85/100. Still can simplify over here on the right-hand side. So I have 6/10 y minus 1 equals 3/10 y. And then 45/100 minus 85/100 is negative, so minus 4/10. Now that each side is simplified, let's start to move some things around. All right, I'm going to subtract 3/10 y on each side so that the variables are on one side. 6/10 y minus 3/10 y is 3/10 y minus 1 equals, on the right-hand side, that makes 0. So we're left with -4/10. Let's add 1 to each side now so that we isolate the variable term. 3/10 y is equal to -4/10 plus 1 is 6/10. And now we can figure out what y is by dividing each side by the 3/10. And when we do that, y is going to be equal to 2. 6/10 divided by 3/10 equals 2. Let's see if it works with the check. 2/10 times 3y minus 5 equals 15/100 times 2y plus 3 minus 85/100. Y is 2. 2/10 times 3 times 2 minus 5 equals 15 hundredths times 2 times 2 plus 3 minus 85 hundredths. All right, in the parentheses now, 3 times 2 rather is 6, so 2 tenths times 6 minus 5 equals 15 hundredths times 2 times 2 is 4 plus 3 minus 85 hundredths. In the parentheses now, 6 minus 5 is 1, so 2 tenths times 1 equals 15 hundredths times 4 plus 3 is 7 minus 85 hundredths. 2 tenths times 1 is just 2 tenths. And on the right, 15 hundredths times 7, well, that's going to be 1 and 5 hundredths minus 85 hundredths. And then if you do 1 and 5 hundredths minus 85 hundredths on the right, you do get 2 tenths. So 2 tenths equals 2 tenths. The check worked out. We know that y has a value of 2. Let's take a look at some word problems that have variables on both sides. Remember, with our word problems, we're going to start off by writing a let statement so that we can define our variable to represent what we're looking for. We'll set up our equation, we'll solve it algebraically, and then we're going to state our answer with just a short sentence that answers the question. In this problem, it says 9 more than 5 times a number is equal to 3 less than 7 times the number. What is the value of the number? Okay, so that's what we're looking for, the value of some unknown number. So the first thing I'm going to do is write a let statement defining a variable. I'm going to say let n equal the value of the number, whatever that number is that we're looking for. Now that I've defined my variable, I'm going to use it in an equation. Okay, they say 9 more than 5 times a number. 9 more than 5 times a number, 9 plus 5n, is equal to 3 less than 7 times a number. All right, to be 3 less than something, I have to subtract 3 at the end. So I'm going to start with 7 times the number, 7n, and then subtract 3 so that we get 3 less than it. So our equation says 9 plus 5n equals 7n minus 3. Each side is simplified already, so I'm going to start to move some things around, starting with the variables. I'm going to subtract 5n from each side so that the variables are on one side. 5n minus itself is 0, so 9 is on the left. 7n minus 5n is 2n minus 3. Let's add 3 to each side. 12 equals 2n. And to get the value of n, we're going to divide each side by 2. All right, so when I do that, 2n divided by 2 is n, and it equals 12 divided by 2, which is 6. So n equals 6. That's the third thing that I had to do. And now the fourth thing, state your answer by writing a short sentence. Well, I was looking for the value of the number, so I can say the value of the number is 6. All right, and it's easy for us to verify that 6 is the answer. You could do a little check. 9 plus 5n equals 7n minus 3. 9 plus 5 times 6 equals 7 times 6 minus 3. 9 plus 30 equals 42 minus 3. 9 plus 30 is 39. 42 minus 3 is also 39. So the value of the number is definitely 6. Let's try a different word problem that has a little more context to it. Bill weighs 120 pounds and is gaining 10 pounds each month. Phil weighs 150 pounds and is gaining 4 pounds each month. How many months will it take for Bill to weigh the same as Phil? All right, so that's what they want to know. How many months will it take? So let's define a variable. Number 1, let n equal the number of months. How long is it going to take in months for Bill and Phil to have the same weight? Let's set the problem up now. Step 2. Bill weighs 120 pounds and is gaining 10 pounds each month. So his starting weight is 120, and we're going to add to that 10 pounds every month. So 10 times n is the number of months. We want Bill's weight to be equal to Phil's weight. Now, Phil weighs 150 and is gaining, so I'm going to add to that 4 pounds every month, which n again is the number of months. So our equation 120 plus 10n equals 150 plus 4n. That can be used to figure out n, the number of months it will take for the weights to be the same. All right, let's go ahead and subtract 4n from each side at the beginning. 120 plus 6n equals 150. We'll isolate 6n by subtracting 120 from each side, and that means 6n equals 30. And if we divide each side by 6, n equals 5. So that's the third thing that I had to do, figure out the value of the variable. And now, what does it mean? Well, n was the number of months, and n equals 5, so it will take 5 months for Bill and Phil to weigh the same. And again, we can do a quick check just to verify. 120 plus 10n equals 150 plus 4n. N we said was 5, so 10 times 5 equals 150 plus 4 times 5. 120 plus 50 equals 150 plus 20. 120 and 50 is 170. 150 and 20 is also 170. So we know it's going to take 5 months for Bill and Phil to have the same weight.